My wife's affair left me with nothing, no home, no kids, and just $600 to my name. Then a letter arrived about my late grandmother's estate in Maine. I drove there, only to discover a 200-year-old mansion, 1,000 acres of forest, and $340 million locked away. But I couldn't touch a dime until I uncovered the truth about my mother's disappearance 40 years ago. Chapter 1, The Letter in the Drive, expanded. The motel smelled of mildew and regret. The buzzing neon sign outside flickered through the cracked blinds, painting the walls in sickly red light. James Holloway sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty pillow beside him, the one that still carried a faint trace of her perfume. Just 6 months ago, he had everything a man could ask for: a 6-bedroom home in Boston, 2 kids who raced into his arms after school, and a wife who used to whisper promises she never meant to keep. Then came the affair. Then the divorce. Then the lawyers who devoured him piece by piece until there was nothing left but a man clinging to $612 and a rusted pickup truck that coughed every time it started. Now, the motel was his castle, the vending machine his kitchen, and the silence his only friend. He was halfway through a cold cup of coffee when a knock came at the door. The clerk handed him a yellow envelope with his name printed neatly across the front. The paper was thick, cream-colored, sealed with a red wax emblem, a stylized H. James frowned, rubbing his thumb over it. From Lawrence and Pine Law Group, Portland, Maine. Inside was a letter that made his heart stop. Mr. Holloway, you are the last living heir to the Holloway estate. Your grandmother, Eleanor Holloway, has passed. You are requested to appear for the reading of her will at the Holloway property, Barrow Hill, Maine. Sincerely, Thomas Pine-esque. For a long moment, James just stared. He hadn't heard the name Eleanor Holloway in decades. His father never spoke of her. Whenever James asked, he'd change the subject or leave the room. The few whispers James remembered from childhood always painted her as a cold, eccentric woman, one who'd locked herself away after the mysterious death of her daughter. Grace asked James's mother. No one ever said how she died, just that it was an accident. But now that ghost of a family name had resurfaced, calling him north to a place he'd never seen but somehow always felt in his bones. He packed what little he owned into the truck the next morning. The world outside was gray and damp, the kind of morning that felt heavy with unfinished stories. With his last few dollars, he filled the gas tank and set off, leaving behind the motel, the city, and the ghosts of his failed marriage. The drive stretched endlessly, highways thinning into winding roads, then narrowing into forest paths. As the miles passed, the air grew colder, the trees denser, their branches arching over the road like skeletal hands. By dusk, fog rolled in thick and silent. Then, through the haze, he saw it. A mansion rose from the mist like a monument to time itself. Gray stone walls, ivy clawing up its face, and an iron gate that groaned as it opened. Every window glowed dimly, as though the house itself was breathing. A man stood waiting at the steps, tall, thin, wrapped in a black overcoat. Mr. Holloway, he said with a courteous nod. I'm Thomas Pine. I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandmother spoke fondly of you, in her own way. James frowned. That's strange. She never spoke to me at all, Pine smiled faintly. She had her reasons. Inside, the mansion felt like walking into a forgotten cathedral. Portraits of long-dead Holloways stared down from the walls, their painted eyes following his every move. Dust drifted through narrow beams of candlelight. Somewhere deep within, a clock ticked, slow, deliberate, ancient. In the study, Pine laid a thick folder on the desk. Your grandmother's estate includes the mansion, 1,000 acres of forest land, and a trust valued at my 340 million tau. James blinked. That has to be a mistake. I assure you, Mr. Holloway, it's very real. Pine said, sliding another envelope across the table. But there's a condition. On the envelope, written in elegant cursive, for James only. James opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a single handwritten note from Eleanor herself. To my grandson, if you wish to claim what is yours, you must uncover what happened to your mother, Grace Holloway, 40 years ago, on this very estate. The truth lies where the forest meets the water. Do not trust anyone who lives on this land. Eleanor. The words hit him like ice. My mother died in a car accident, he muttered. Pine adjusted his glasses, voice soft. That's what the records say. But your grandmother, she never believed it. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang, faint and hollow, like a memory that refused to die. Pine stood, collecting his briefcase. You'll stay here tonight. The staff will prepare a room. Staff? James asked. I thought she lived alone. Pine's smile faltered for the first time. She had company. As James climbed the grand staircase, the lights flickered. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of rain and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. A shadow moved at the end of the hall. He turned sharply. No one was there. And then, a whisper, soft, female, fragile. Find me. James, he froze. His breath clouded in the air. The voice was gone, swallowed by the house's ancient silence. Only the grandfather clock ticked in reply, marking each second that drew him closer to the truth, waiting in the woods of Barrow Hill. Chapter 2. The Secret Beneath the Pines. The next morning, fog blanketed the forest. James woke to the sound of crows and the faint ticking of that same clock downstairs. He dressed and wandered the halls. Portraits of Holloway ancestors stared down at him, all sharp cheekbones, cold eyes and secrets buried behind gilded frames. In the kitchen, an elderly maid named Martha poured coffee without meeting his gaze. Did you know my grandmother well? James asked. Long enough, she muttered. She wasn't an easy woman. And my mother? Grace? The woman's hand froze mid-air. You should leave that be, Mr. Holloway. Some graves don't like to be opened. He stared. What graves? But she turned and walked away. Hours later, James followed the path behind the mansion, the one that led where the forest meets the water, as Eleanor's note had said. The woods were thick, ancient. Every branch seemed to lean inward as if guarding something. Finally, he reached a lake, black and still, surrounded by crooked willows. On the edge of the water stood a rusted bell tower, and below it, half buried under moss, was the outline of a car. A silver locket glimmered in the mud beside it. He picked it up. Inside was a photo of his mother holding him as a baby. Heart pounding. James called Pine. You told me my mother died in a car accident. You didn't say the car was still here. There was silence on the line. Then Pine spoke, his tone unnervingly calm. I told you not to trust anyone who lives on the estate. James froze. What are you talking about? The accident wasn't an accident, Pine said. Your grandmother knew. So did your father. And so did I. Before James could respond, the phone went dead. A twig snapped behind him. He turned. Martha stood there, eyes wide, holding a shotgun. You shouldn't have come here, she hissed. Eleanor wanted to protect you from this. From him? From who? Before she could answer, headlights cut through the fog, a black sedan rolling up the dirt path. Pine stepped out, expression cold. I warned her you'd dig too deep. James realized then the lawyer had never been working for his grandmother. He had been working against her. She found out what you did to my mother, James said quietly. Pine smiled. She found out too late. Martha screamed, firing a warning shot, and chaos erupted. Pine ducked, James lunged, and the echo of gunfire ripped through the trees. When the smoke cleared, Pine was on the ground, wounded but alive. James stood over him, breathing hard. "You killed her, didn't you?" Pine smirked through blood. "Your father did, and he paid for his silence. You're just the final loose end." Before James could react, Pine reached for his gun, but Martha fired first. Silence. The lake rippled as the last echoes faded. Hours later, police cars lined the estate. The truth came out in fragments: corruption, inheritance fraud, and a 40-year cover-up. Pine had orchestrated it all to seize the Holloway fortune. Grace Holloway had discovered it and died trying to expose it. As the sun rose over Barrow Hill, James stood by the lake, holding the locket. He finally understood what his grandmother meant. Some inheritances aren't gifts. They're burdens that demand truth. You can lose everything and still come back stronger. Because sometimes, the road to redemption isn't about what you inherit, it's about what you uncover.